Learning to code and starting a career in technology can be incredibly difficult, but it doesn't have to be. Making the right choices at the right time can make all the difference in your journey. So I learned to code quite a while ago. I spent some time in the industry, consulting, teaching at university, and now I employ other software engineers to build cool products for startups. But if I was to rewind all of that and not have any of that experience, where would I start? What would I do? And this video is about how to start from zero. So over the course of this video, I'm going to go over the 6 things that I would personally do if I was just getting into tech today. So the first step is choosing a path. How do you decide where you want to start your journey? In order to answer this question, it's important to go back to what the root of all programming is, and essentially that is problem solving. Choosing a technical path or platform is like choosing a paintbrush that you're going to paint your masterpiece with. Even though technically it's possible to paint a fence with a fine tip brush, that is not the ideal tool to the job, and similarly you can paint a vase with a roller brush, but that is not going to turn out the way that you want it to. So just like that in tech, it's important to choose the right tool, but it's not required to waste time deciding between multiple options and not moving forward. Since I want this video to be actionable, if I was to choose the most Swiss Army platform of them all, the best language to learn for a beginner, I would personally say Python. The reason I say that is because it's a great tool. You can do back-end, machine learning, even front-end work with Python with the different libraries that it offers. And it's definitely the most helpful if you don't want to spend time with the more technical base elements of computer programming like memory allocation and other things. If you do want to dive deeper into more of the low-level elements of programming, I would recommend starting with C++, which is a language that a lot of the modern frameworks are built on top of. This is actually the language that I started with in my actual career, but I have since transitioned into other frameworks, JavaScript, Python, and many others. If you want a fantastic base in programming and something that's not necessarily going to vault you into a career early on, I would recommend C++ if you have the time and the technical knowledge to do it. The second thing that I would do if I was starting to code from scratch is to start with free. Now this is incredibly important. I've seen so many YouTube videos across the internet that share the best Coursera courses or all these things that cost money or certifications that cost money, and they're just not necessary when you're starting out. The sheer amount of good information that exists today for free is incredible, even more so than when I started my career years ago. So I wholeheartedly recommend that you start with some of these free resources. I'll link some of them in the description below if you want to check out the ones that I've used in the past and that I recommend. So the reason that I recommend you start with free tools rather than some of the paid options is the same reason why UI designers start their first drafts on paper. It's so much easier to switch things up and pivot directions if you haven't committed too much time, resources, and money in the first place. Okay, the third thing that I would recommend is picking a job and then studying to get that job. Way too many of the people that I work with, hire, or mentor have started their journey by picking a language, and then after they've completed that journey, they've learned everything they feel like they need to learn, then they go out to the job market and try and find something that's available. And this is something that I particularly see common with bootcamp graduates, that they take the bootcamp ensuring that after that bootcamp they'll be able to get a job, and a lot of times the bootcamp is encouraging this type of thinking, but I would say even though that bootcamp is probably doing everything they can to help get you a job, getting a job is not something that's going to automatically land in your lap. It's really difficult, and it's a process that can take a very long time. The earlier you start that process and you intentionally build yourself into a role that you want, the better chances that you will have. So the way that I would recommend going about this is making a list of the companies and roles that you would like to work for, see what open opportunities they have right now, even though you're not quite ready for it yet. Review the requirements that you see in those job descriptions and treat it like a wish list of the skills that you want to accomplish. You don't need 100% of them, but a lot of times you can make a list of the top 3 or 4 things that you see common across many job descriptions and start to build your skills into a resume that will really apply to that job. So as you finish those things, as you're learning each of those elements according to the list in the job description, start to build your resume line items to match that exactly. The things that you're learning are intentional so that you can get a job, so your resume should look exactly the same. You'll see as you go through the job market that a lot of the line items are copy and pasted from other jobs and other roles that exist in the industry. A lot of times companies and HR departments just copy and paste from other things, so you'll see a lot of them in common, and that's why you can build your resume toward those job descriptions. Another thing on these lines that is incredibly important is please don't be tempted by the ridiculous salaries that you're seeing on headlines and in social media posts. There's a reason these posts go viral because everyone's so intrigued by all the money that's being made by the top engineers in the industry. Many times these job descriptions and salaries are not actually realistic. I can promise you that for every senior or staff engineer that's making $500,000 a year or more, there are 500 more senior engineers that are making $90,000 to $100,000 a year with great benefits, and they're very happy at their jobs. If you extrapolate from that and you think about what a junior engineer salary should be, keep in mind that it will be significantly less than that, and it'll be something that will grow as you grow in your career. A career is a very long time, and it's supposed to last for dozens of years. It's not something where you should expect to become a millionaire in a few years because you learned to code. That's super important, and I really want to make sure that those expectations are realistic. Okay, so the fourth step that I would take if I was back to ground zero would be to prepare for the interview. After I've already set up the job, I've built my skill set to match that job description, now it's time to get ready to have that interview. Remember, as you're applying as well, that only 8% on average of the job applications that you sent out will actually provide a callback for an interview. That means that you'll probably have to send 12 or 13 job applications just to get a single interview. Now that may seem like a crazy number, and there are lots of ways, and I'll probably go into a future video on that about how you can improve those odds, but keep in mind that it's a process that can take a long time. Now I know interviews can be tough. Now, having been on both sides as the interviewee and the interviewer, I know that it's kind of frustrating in the software industry in general, the technical interviews, there's a lot of information on both sides. And I can tell you that as an interviewer, it's not actually done out of spite, and it's not done to make you feel uncomfortable. We truly want to establish that, number one, you have the confidence in the language that you're trying to learn, or in programming in general if you're starting as a junior role. And two, it's important for the interviewer and the company to know that you're able to solve problems on your own without any help, and be able to do so is really telling of your problem-solving ability in general and the initiative that you'll be able to take in the role. The best tip that I give to the people that I'm mentoring and anyone else that asks is to make sure you're doing mock interviews. And it doesn't have to be with someone that has a software engineering degree. It could simply be with a friend or with a family member or anyone else. Doing these mock interviews is super important because it allows you to ensure that you're able to convey your thoughts reasonably and even to someone who doesn't have any technical knowledge. Oftentimes you'll be having interviews with someone that isn't necessarily on a technical team, and you'll have to be able to show that you can problem solve and show that you can take complicated concepts and bring those down to the level of someone who isn't technical. So if you can help your friend or family member that doesn't have computer science experience understand what you're trying to accomplish in a technical interview style question, then you are definitely ready to have that first interview. And I know there's probably going to be much more content on coding interviews in general, and I'll have to put that off for another video, but leave it in the comment section if you have a specific question and I will definitely answer it. So the fifth thing is also super important, and that's planning your career. It's really exciting and really fun to think out 5-10 years from now what you can accomplish, especially when you're first getting into technology. You won't be a junior developer forever, so you want to make sure you're thinking about what steps you're planning on taking in your career to take yourself, your skills, and your opportunity to the next level. This can be incredibly fun, so try to be creative and optimistic and excited as you go through this process. And the first step of this is to start with the job that you already have or the job that you're going for if you're a junior engineer just getting into the space. Next, you want to think about how you want your career to grow. In general, from my experience, there are three main areas where a software or tech career can grow. Each of these different career paths probably deserve their own video completely, so if you'd like one on any particular different career path, leave that in the comment section and we'll definitely make that video. But for now, suffice to say that those three areas are specialization, parallel careers, and management. Let's start with the parallel careers. This refers to jobs like tech lead, solution architect, or even more removed from the hands-on keyboard coding work, things like scrum lead or product owner. While these are definitely tech adjacent roles, they don't rely as much on keeping up with all the syntax and the changes of programming languages. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of people like these roles, is because you don't have to worry too much about the technical proficiency in any particular language. In general though, these roles do tend to come with more of the business level headaches that you might have to deal with, like user acceptance testing, timelines, planning, sprints, and all those different things. Second, let's talk about specialization. Now this is a way for you to dive even deeper into the technical aspects of coding. There's always that one guy at work or at your job that knows absolutely everything there is to know about a language or a platform, and you're almost sure that he's the original creator of Bitcoin. But to get to that level, you really need a serious dedication to your craft and an ability to focus on the minutiae of the details and the things that might go well or wrong with a particular platform or language. This type of role definitely is not for the faint of heart. A lot of responsibility lies on those specialists, but they are compensated quite well, so sometimes that's worth it. And lastly, we want to talk about management. Now this is a pretty easy one to understand. As you grow in your career, it's a lot easier for the company in general to just promote those engineers to be managers of other engineers, then managers of managers, managers of entire departments, and so forth, eventually leading to something like a VP of engineering or a CTO role. This is a super long-term play. If you want to go for this type of career, usually you'll be working for 15 years before you're landing in that level of VP of engineering or CTO. But if you really enjoy that level of business management, or maybe you want to start your own thing someday, it's definitely valuable to have that level of business acumen, and it's something that you can study throughout your career to improve and eventually be successful in those roles. You'll be spending a lot more time managing people, managing processes, and really starting to understand the growth of an entire department versus the growth of any specific engineer. It's really fun, really enjoyable, and something that I particularly am focusing on. The only unfortunate part is that unless you're spending significant hours outside of work practicing, you do start to lose your coding skills after a while. Okay, the sixth thing that I want to talk about is why you are always starting over. Everyone needs to remember that in a tech career, things change all the time. In creating this video, I realized that even though I'm trying to think about what would happen if I had to go back and start from zero, I'm actually going to be starting from zero multiple times in my career as new things come out and new technologies completely change the game. These new companies and new technologies are exactly the reason that we got into tech in the first place, and it allows us to learn something new and something exciting every few years. That's why I personally got into technology to begin with. Make sure that you're always prepared and ready to take on those new things when they come up, and you're not intimidated by the process of learning. That's something that you really have to focus on throughout your career, that even 10 years from now, you're willing to drop everything and learn something new and really dive into something that's potentially going to impact and completely change the way that we live our lives and the way technology runs the world. You definitely don't want to become too comfortable or too complacent in the things that you're doing and the role that you're in, because eventually technology will pass you. Okay, so if you're starting your journey and you're starting from zero, there's a chance you've already completed many of the things that I have on this list. If you're ready to start your job hunt and you're starting to prepare your materials to get that first job as a developer, I would definitely recommend watching this video that I made specifically for that purpose. All of that said, I wish you the best of luck getting into technology, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.